You worthless, filthy creature. How dare you even breathe the same air as me? The words sliced through the room like a jagged knife, each syllable dripping with venom. Mrs. Evelyn Harrington, the epitome of elegance and cruelty, stood in the center of the lavish living room, her designer heels clicking ominously against the marble floor. Her eyes, cold and unfeeling, bore into Maria, the maid, who stood trembling in her worn-out uniform, clutching a feather duster like a shield. The air was thick with tension, the scent of expensive perfume mingling with the acrid stench of humiliation. Maria's heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing the pain of the words hurled at her. But Evelyn wasn't done. She stepped closer, her red lips curling into a sneer. Look at you. Pathetic. You're nothing but a stain in this house. A stain I can't wait to erase. Maria's breath hitched, her vision blurring as the room seemed to close in around her. The sound of Evelyn's voice was deafening, each word a hammer striking her already fragile spirit. She wanted to run, to escape the torment, but her feet felt rooted to the ground. The weight of Evelyn's disdain was suffocating, a tangible force pressing down on her chest. But what Evelyn didn't know, what she couldn't see, was the small, almost imperceptible glint of a hidden camera nestled among the ornate decorations of the room. Maria had placed it there days ago, a silent witness to the cruelty she endured. It was her only hope, her only weapon in a battle she never asked for. Maria had always been a fighter. Born into poverty in a small village, she had learned early on that life was anything but fair. Her first job was at a rundown diner, where she worked 12-hour shifts for barely enough to survive. It was during this time that she met Carlos, a charming but unreliable man who swept her off her feet. But reality came crashing down when Carlos abandoned her, leaving her pregnant and alone. Desperate, Maria took a job as a maid for the Harringtons, one of the wealthiest families in the city. Evelyn Harrington was a woman who thrived on power and control. She saw Maria not as a human being, but as a tool to be used and discarded. The insults, the demands, the constant belittlement, it was a daily ritual. Maria endured it all, her only solace the thought of her child. But as the months passed, the weight of Evelyn's cruelty became unbearable. The day of the living room incident was the breaking point. Maria had been cleaning the house from top to bottom, her pregnant belly making every movement a struggle. She had just finished polishing the grand piano when Evelyn stormed in, her face twisted in rage. "What is this?" Evelyn hissed, holding up a delicate porcelain figurine. "It's chipped. Do you have any idea how much this is worth?" Maria's heart sank. She had been careful, so careful, but accidents happened. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Harrington. I didn't mean to." "Sorry?" Evelyn interrupted, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. "Sorry doesn't fix this, you incompetent fool." The tirade that followed was worse than anything Maria had experienced before. Evelyn's words were like daggers, each one cutting deeper than the last. She called Maria every name in the book, her voice echoing off the walls of the opulent room. And then, in a final act of cruelty, she grabbed Maria's arm and shoved her toward the door. "Get out of my sight," Evelyn spat. "You're fired. And don't even think about asking for a reference." Maria stumbled out of the room, her heart shattered. She had lost everything, her job, her dignity, her hope. But as she walked away, a small, defiant part of her whispered that this wasn't the end. She had the recording. And she would use it. Maria's small apartment was a stark contrast to the opulence of the Harrington mansion. The walls were thin, the paint peeling in places, and the furniture was secondhand, but it was hers. For the first time in years, she had a space where she could breathe, where she wasn't constantly under someone's scrutinizing gaze. The baby growing inside her was a constant reminder of why she had to keep going, even when the weight of the world felt unbearable. The days following her firing were a blur. Maria spent most of her time in a daze, her mind replaying the scene in the living room over and over again. Evelyn's voice echoed in her head, each word a fresh wound. But amidst the pain there was a flicker of something else, anger. Not the kind of anger that burns hot and fades quickly, but a slow, simmering rage that demanded justice. It was late one night, as she sat on the edge of her bed, her hands resting on her swollen belly, that Maria finally decided to act. She reached for the small, unassuming USB drive she had hidden in the bottom of her bag. The footage from the hidden camera was on it, a silent witness to the cruelty she had endured. She had been too afraid to watch it before, too afraid to relive the humiliation. But now she knew she had to. With trembling hands, she plugged the drive into her laptop and pressed play. The screen came to life, and there it was. The living room, Evelyn's face twisted in rage, her words cutting through the air like knives. Maria watched as Evelyn shoved her, as she called her names that no one should ever have to hear. She watched herself, small and broken, trying to hold back tears. It was painful to see, but it was also undeniable proof. For the first time, Maria allowed herself to feel the full weight of what had happened. She cried, not just for herself but for all the time she had been made to feel less than human. She cried for the child she was carrying, who would never know the kind of life she had dreamed of. But amidst the tears, there was a spark of determination. She couldn't let Evelyn get away with this. She couldn't let her continue to hurt others. The next morning, Maria reached out to Sofia Martinez, a journalist known for her fearless exposés on corruption and abuse. Sofia had a reputation for standing up for the little guy, and Maria had read her articles with a mix of admiration and envy. She had never imagined she would need someone like Sofia, but now she was her only hope. They met at a small cafe on the outskirts of the city. Sofia was younger than Maria had expected, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She listened intently as Maria told her story, her expression growing darker with each word. When Maria handed her the USB drive, Sofia's jaw tightened. "This is horrifying," Sofia said, her voice low. "But it's also exactly the kind of story that needs to be told. People need to see this. They need to know what's happening behind closed doors." Maria nodded, her heart pounding. She was scared, terrified even, but she knew this was the right thing to do. I don't want anyone else to go through what I did," she said, her voice trembling. Sofia reached across the table and placed a hand on Maria's. "You're incredibly brave for coming forward. This isn't going to be easy, but I'll be with you every step of the way." Over the next few days, Sofia worked tirelessly to verify the footage and gather additional evidence. She interviewed former employees of the Harringtons, many of whom had similar stories of abuse and mistreatment. The more she dug, the more she uncovered, a pattern of cruelty that spanned years, all hidden behind the Harrington family's polished facade. Maria, meanwhile, tried to focus on preparing for the baby. She attended prenatal classes, bought second-hand baby clothes, and even started a small savings fund. But her mind was never far from the upcoming exposé. She knew it would change everything, but she also knew it was necessary. The night before the story was set to go live, Maria couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. What if no one cared? What if Evelyn found a way to twist the narrative? What if she came after her? The fear was paralyzing, but so was the thought of doing nothing. Finally, she got up and sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. She placed a hand on her belly, feeling the baby kick. "We're going to be okay," she whispered, more to herself than to the child. "No matter what happens, we're going to be okay." The next morning, the story broke. The headline was bold and unapologetic: "Behind Closed Doors, the Harringtons' Reign of Terror." The article detailed Evelyn's abuse, supported by the footage and testimonies from former employees. It was everywhere, on the news, on social media, on the lips of every person in the city. Maria watched it all unfold from her apartment, her heart in her throat. The response was overwhelming. People were outraged, demanding justice. The Harringtons' carefully constructed image began to crumble, and for the first time, Maria allowed herself to hope. But the fight wasn't over. Evelyn wasn't the type to go down without a fight, and Maria knew she would retaliate. What she didn't know was just how far Evelyn would go, or how deep the secrets of the Harrington family truly ran. As the days passed, Maria began to feel a strange sense of empowerment. She had been broken, but she was piecing herself back together. And this time she wasn't alone. She had Sofia, she had the public, and she had the strength of a mother fighting for her child. The turning point had come, and Maria was ready to face whatever came next. The fallout from Sofia's exposé was immediate and explosive. The Harrington name, once synonymous with power, wealth, and prestige, became a lightning rod for public outrage. The footage of Evelyn's abuse played on loop across news channels, her venomous words echoing in living rooms and offices across the city. Social media erupted with hashtags like #JusticeForMaria and #HarringtonHypocrisy, as people from all walks of life voiced their disgust and demanded accountability. Maria watched it all from her small apartment, her baby now cradled in her arms. She had named her daughter Esperanza, Hope. It was a name that felt fitting, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there was always a glimmer of light. As she scrolled through the news on her phone, she felt a mix of emotions: relief, vindication, but also a deep, lingering sadness. She had never wanted this. All she had ever wanted was to be treated with dignity. But the world had other plans. The story had taken on a life of its own, and Maria was no longer just a victim. She had become a symbol, a beacon of resilience in the face of unimaginable cruelty. Strangers reached out to her, offering words of encouragement and support. Some shared their own stories of abuse, inspired by her courage to speak out. It was overwhelming, but it also gave Maria a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Meanwhile, the Harringtons were scrambling to contain the damage. Evelyn, ever the narcissist, initially tried to deny the allegations. She released a statement calling the footage doctored, and Maria a disgruntled former employee with an axe to grind. But her words rang hollow. The evidence was too damning and the public wasn't buying it. Her carefully curated image as the elegant, philanthropic wife of a powerful businessman was shattered. Mr. Harrington, on the other hand, remained eerily silent. He was a man who had always operated behind the scenes, letting his wife take the spotlight while he pulled the strings. But as the scandal deepened, cracks began to appear in his facade. Whispers of his complicity started to surface, and it wasn't long before the media turned its attention to him. Sophia, ever the relentless journalist, was already digging deeper. She had a hunch that Evelyn's abuse was just the tip of the iceberg, and she was determined to uncover the truth. Her investigation led her to former employees of the Harringtons, maids, drivers, gardeners, who had all been too afraid to speak out before. Their stories painted a chilling picture of a household ruled by fear and manipulation. One former employee, a woman named Rosa, agreed to speak on the record. "It wasn't just Evelyn," she told Sophia, her voice trembling. "Mr. Harrington knew. He knew everything. He would just look the other way. Sometimes he'd even encourage her. It was like a game to them." Sophia's article, titled "The Harringtons' House of Horrors," was published a week later. It detailed not only Evelyn's abuse but also Mr. Harrington's complicity. The public's outrage reached a fever pitch. Protesters gathered outside the Harringtons' mansion, holding signs that read, "No more silence," and "Justice for the vulnerable." The family's business partners began to distance themselves, and their social circle, once so eager to bask in their reflected glory, quickly evaporated. For Maria, the developments were both satisfying and surreal. She had never imagined that her story would have such far-reaching consequences. But as she watched the Harringtons' empire crumble, she couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. Not for them, but for all the people who had suffered in silence for so long. She thought about Rosa, about the other employees who had shared their stories, and about the countless others who hadn't yet found their voice. One evening, as she sat by the window with Esperanza in her arms, Maria received a call from Sophia. "Maria, I need to tell you something," Sophia said, her voice tinged with urgency. "I've been digging deeper into the Harringtons' finances and, well, let's just say there's more to this story than we thought. I think Mr. Harrington's been involved in some shady dealings. Illegal stuff. This could be huge." Maria's heart raced. "What kind of dealings?" she asked. "I'm still piecing it together," Sophia replied. "But it looks like he's been using his business as a front for money laundering. And there are rumors of connections to organized crime. If this is true, it could bring down not just the Harringtons, but a whole network of powerful people." Maria was silent for a moment, processing the information. "What do you need from me?" she finally asked. "Just your support," Sophia said. "This is going to get messy and it's going to get dangerous. But if we can expose this, it could change everything." Maria looked down at Esperanza, who was sleeping peacefully in her arms. She thought about the life she wanted for her daughter, a life free from fear, from cruelty, from the shadows of the past. "I'm in," she said firmly. "Whatever it takes." As the days turned into weeks, the scandal continued to unfold. The Harringtons' once impenetrable facade was crumbling, and Maria found herself at the center of a movement she had never anticipated. She was no longer just a victim, she was a fighter, a voice for the voiceless. And as she looked at Esperanza, she knew that her fight was far from over. But amidst the chaos, there was a sense of hope. The world was watching, and for the first time, the Harringtons couldn't hide behind their wealth and power. The reckoning had come, and Maria was ready to face whatever came next. Just when it seemed like the Harringtons had been thoroughly exposed, a shocking revelation came to light, one that would change everything. It turned out that Mr. Harrington's crimes went far beyond money laundering. He had been involved in a human trafficking ring, using his business as a cover to exploit vulnerable people. And Evelyn, far from being an unwitting participant, had been his willing accomplice. The truth was more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. But for Maria, it was also a turning point. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about all the people who had suffered at the hands of the Harringtons and others like them. and she was determined to see justice served, no matter the cost. The revelation about Mr. Harrington's involvement in human trafficking sent shockwaves through the city. What had started as a story about a wealthy family's abuse of their staff had now unraveled into something far darker, far more sinister. The public's outrage reached a boiling point, and the Harringtons, once untouchable, found themselves at the center of a storm they couldn't escape. Sophia's investigation had uncovered a network of corruption that extended far beyond the Harrington mansion. Mr. Harrington's business, a sprawling empire of luxury hotels and resorts, had been used as a front for trafficking vulnerable women and children. The details were horrifying: fake job offers, forged documents, and a web of lies designed to lure people into a life of exploitation. And Evelyn, far from being an innocent bystander, had played a key role in recruiting and manipulating victims. Maria was stunned when Sophia shared the findings with her. She had known the Harringtons were cruel, but this was beyond anything she could have imagined. As she sat in her apartment, holding Esperanza close, she felt a surge of anger, not just for herself, but for all the people who had suffered at the Harringtons' hands. "This is bigger than we thought," Sophia said during one of their meetings. "But it's also our chance to bring them down for good. We have to go public with this." Maria nodded, her resolve hardening. "Do it," she said. "Whatever it takes." The story broke the next day, and the fallout was immediate. The Harringtons were arrested, their assets frozen, and their empire dismantled. The media coverage was relentless, and the public's demand for justice was deafening. But for Maria, the victory felt bittersweet. Yes, the Harringtons had been exposed, but the damage they had caused was irreversible. Lives had been destroyed, families torn apart, and the scars would last a lifetime. As the weeks passed, Maria found herself thrust into the spotlight. She was no longer just a victim, she was a symbol of resilience, a voice for the voiceless. She began speaking at rallies, sharing her story and advocating for stronger protections for domestic workers and trafficking victims. It was terrifying at first, but with each speech she grew stronger. She was no longer the trembling maid in the Harringtons' living room. She was Maria, a fighter, a survivor, a mother. But the fight wasn't over. The Harringtons' trial was set to begin, and Maria knew it would be a long, grueling process. She also knew that powerful people were still out there, people who had benefited from the Harringtons' crimes and would do anything to protect themselves. The threats started soon after the story broke. Anonymous calls, letters, even a break-in at her apartment. But Maria refused to back down. She had come too far to let fear dictate her life. One evening, as she was putting Esperanza to bed, Maria received a call from Sophia. "Maria, I need to see you," Sophia said, her voice tense. "I found something big. But it's not safe to talk over the phone." They met at a quiet park, away from prying eyes. Sophia handed Maria a folder filled with documents. "This is everything," she said. "Bank records, emails, names. It's all here. The Harringtons were just the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole network of powerful people involved in this, politicians, business leaders, even law enforcement. If we can expose this, it could change everything." Maria flipped through the documents, her heart pounding. The scale of the corruption was staggering. But amidst the shock, she felt a flicker of hope. This was their chance to make a real difference, to ensure that no one else would suffer as she had. "What do we do?" Maria asked. "We take it to the authorities," Sophia replied. "But we have to be careful. These people are dangerous and they won't go down without a fight." Maria nodded, her mind racing. She thought about Esperanza, about the future she wanted for her daughter. She thought about all the people who had been hurt, all the lives that had been destroyed. And she knew what she had to do. The months that followed were a whirlwind of legal battles, media scrutiny, and personal growth. Maria worked closely with law enforcement, providing testimony and evidence that helped dismantle the trafficking network. It was exhausting, both physically and emotionally, but she refused to give up. She had found her purpose, and she was determined to see it through. The Harringtons' trial was a media circus, with every detail dissected and debated. Evelyn, once so confident and cruel, now looked hollow and defeated. Mr. Harrington, the man who had always operated in the shadows, was finally forced into the light. The evidence against them was overwhelming, and the verdict was swift, guilty on all counts. As Maria watched the Harringtons being led away in handcuffs, she felt a sense of closure. But she also knew that her journey was far from over. The fight for justice was ongoing, and there were still so many people who needed help. In the years that followed, Maria became a leading advocate for victims of abuse and trafficking. She founded a non-profit organization dedicated to providing support and resources for survivors, and she worked tirelessly to push for legislative change. Her story inspired countless others to come forward, to demand justice, and to believe in the possibility of a better future. Esperanza grew up surrounded by love and strength, a living testament to her mother's resilience. Maria often told her daughter, "The world may try to break you, but it can never take away your strength. That is yours and yours alone." And as Maria looked back on her journey, she realized that every hardship, every moment of pain, had led her to this place. She had been broken, but she had rebuilt herself, stronger and more determined than ever. The scars were still there, but they were a reminder of how far she had come. The Harringtons had tried to destroy her, but in the end they had only made her stronger. And for Maria that was the greatest victory of all.